Let's discuss expectations with Samiran Chakravarti, Regional Head of Research with Stanchart, and along with him, Leif Ekkesen. He's Chief Economist for India and he represents HSBC. Samiran, Leif, gentlemen, good morning to you as well. Thank you for joining us. Let me first start with you, Samiran. What are your estimates for Q1 GDP and within pockets, how do you see agri and services moving?
We are currently working with an estimate of about 5.3% of GDP for the first quarter of FY13. There are downside risks to this forecast, primarily if the service sector does not perform as well as we are anticipating. So we are looking at industrial growth, including construction, to be around 2%. We have already seen that IIP growth is very close to zero. We are anticipating that with a relatively drier monsoon period, construction activity might have been relatively better. On services, we are looking at about 7.6%, which is a drop from last quarter's 7.9%, but still a pretty healthy number. The big risk is that whether services will give you the 7.6% print or not.
Leif, hi, morning. What are your estimates for India's June quarter GDP, and how do you see the various segments, agri, industry, as well as services sector shaping up?
Well, we're looking at the growth number to come in at 5.3%, so pretty much unchanged growth relative to the first quarter. In terms of, as you say, the key sectors in the economy, we could get some slowdown in agricultural output, partly because the monsoons were delivering less rain than expected in June. They may have had some impact on agricultural output. In addition to that, growth in the manufacturing segment has also been somewhat slower than expected in the April-June quarter as well. Part reason for that, of course, is the external headwinds. Another reason is also that there have been, power outages that have had impact on growth and output in the manufacturing sector. The services sector, on the other hand, we do expect to have shown somewhat more resilience. And we've also seen that in some of the high-frequency indicators, for example, PMI readings. So that could move slightly upward relative to the first quarter.
Leif, what are your estimates for FY13 Indian GDP growth, and what will be the drivers for the economy?
For the full fiscal year, we're looking at growth of 6.2%. So it will be a deceleration relative to last fiscal year. However, we are expecting moderate and gradual recovery in the second half of the fiscal. That would be led by some recovery in manufacturing output from the lows we saw in the first half of the fiscal and also last year. And also to some extent a gradual recovery in growth in the services sector. What will drive that is two key things as we build into our forecast. Number one is we are assuming that the government will deliver some progress on structural reforms that would help alleviate some of the supply side constraints on the economy. If we get some traction on policy reform, that also is something that can be positive for domestic as well as foreign investor sentiments when it comes to India. So that could also help lift growth in the second half of the year and improve confidence in both, shall we say, India and outside of India, supporting growth in both the manufacturing and the services segment. But the recovery will be quite moderate.
Samiran, what about your estimates for the FY13 GDP numbers, and what do you think are going to be the drivers?
We are at present looking around a 6% mark on GDP growth. But yes, there are 2-3 big risks that are kind of lined up, which we probably wouldn't have anticipated 2-3 months back. One is, as you mentioned, about the Eurozone crisis. The second is that the monsoon effect, how it will impact rural consumption. And third is that we were anticipating that there could be some reform steps taken, and that those reform steps will revive investment growth in the second half of the year to some extent. But the more delay we are seeing on those reform measures being taken, the chances are that we could have downside risk to our 6% growth forecast as well.
Leif, how do you see the investment and the industrial growth in India, and are the structural drivers intact, or do you think that there has been a stark change in the fundamentals of the Indian economy?
There has, been a structural slowdown in growth over the last couple of years because of the lack of structural reform implementation, or slow structural reform implementation relative to expected. But I would say that the underlying growth story in India, the medium-term growth story in India, is still very, very strong. You still have a number of key factors in place that will continue to support growth. Of course, demographics are quite strong. People are moving up the income ladder. That also adds to, should we say, the growth story. The urbanization trends are still quite strong as well. And then I would say the entrepreneurial spirit in India, as always, is very firm. I think the key thing to watch out for over the short as well as medium term is that we just need to get some more traction on the structural reforms that can alleviate supply side constraints such as infrastructure gaps, making it easier to do business, further developing the financial sector. Things like that will help India better tap into its strong growth potential over the medium term, and that growth potential is still very much there.
Leif and Samira, and thank both of you for taking time out and joining us on the show today.